My name is Susan Caldwell. Hon. Am 70 years old. Hair. Am a widow. I live alone in the same Lightwood house in Charleston, where I raised my son and buried my husband. I have always been a simple but firm woman. I worked, cooked, was a wife, was a mother, and now, it's just me. Have you ever received a warning so unexpected, so urgent, that your skin crawled before the mind even understood it? Because that's what I felt when my doctor, at the end of a routine appointment, handed me a note hidden inside my bag, a folded piece of paper with 6 words that changed everything. Don't go home. Run. Maybe you've felt something that you couldn't explain. A strange silence coming from the one you love. A different look. A move away that starts slowly until Motown, when you realize it has already been left behind. This all started with a whisper, a cold dish at dinner, and ended with a truth that went through me like a knife. Today, I'm going to tell you what really happened that night, what I found, and why I was never the same after that note. Because sometimes the disease is not in the body. It's indoors. Why not in no-go? And there's our last name. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. That same night I left the office, with a note still shaking between my fingers, I discovered that my son and daughter-in-law had a plan. A cold-eyed, calculated plan, hidden behind fake smiles and sweet words. They wanted to interdict me, declare myself crazy, to get me out of the house I built with my husband, and lock myself in a nursing home, while they took care of everything that was mine. But what they never imagined is that I also knew how to hide. He knew how to wait, and that my silence hid more than pain. It hid a heritage, a living memory, and a woman who has learned to react without shouting. Before continuing, if this story has already touched your heart, if you know someone who has been left aside by their own family, or if you just want to give me your hand for a few minutes while I open this wound, subscribe here to the channel, leave your like, and stay with me. Now, I don't want this story to be just mine. I want it to be a mirror, and perhaps a warning, because sometimes those who are being erased, he is the one who has the most light stored within him. I have always been a routine woman. Monday morning was the day to go to Harris Teeter, pick up the same Fuji apples, the same whole wheat bread, and greet the cashier girl who always called me Miss Susan, the most elegant lady in Charleston. I smiled, adjusted my flowery fabric bag, and went home, where everything was in the place I chose myself. I like the calm of repeated things, the sound of the wall clock, the smell of cinnamon in the late afternoon, and once a week the phone rang in Pastor Elroy's deep voice, asking me if I could bring lemon cake to the community cafe. That was my life. Simple, and actually quiet, winning, love. But what really sustained me was knowing that I had a family. that, even though he didn't always come, my son was around. Mi giorno, Ryan was adopted as a baby, a gift from God when my body could no longer bear children. I loved him as if he had left me. He was my mission. I did everything I could, everything I couldn't. I stopped going to college, traveling, having friends. Every penny, every sigh, every sleepless night was for him. Today, he is a manager at a bank in Charleston, lives in Mount Pleasant with his wife Melissa, who has always treated me with that icy politeness, like someone who tolerates an old piece of furniture in the living room, and with my granddaughter Ellie, my sweetheart. Ellie grew up in my house. I made rag dolls for her. Mwah. I kept all her drawings in a lilac binder that I still have to this day. But for some time now, visits have decreased. The calls became hurried messages. Ellie stopped calling me Grandma and started calling me just Susan. And I pretended I couldn't see it. He pretended that coldness was just tiredness, that forgetfulness was just distraction. But it was deeper, like when you feel a crack in the floor of the house, and you try to put a rug on top, thinking it will solve it. The straw that broke the camel's back came at a Sunday lunch. I had done everything with so much affection. Prime rib in the oven, mashed potatoes, blackberry pie, near, They arrived late, Melissa didn't even take off her sunglasses. Ryan was checking his phone all the time, and Ellie wouldn't let go of her headphones. At one point, without looking up from her plate, Melissa said, "No, you shouldn't live alone anymore." Susan, it's dangerous for someone your age. It's not a concern. It was a warning. And I listened. He just didn't know how to answer. That night, after they left, I went to wash the dishes, and my hand trembled. It was not fear. It was a deep sadness, as if someone was slowly taking me out of my own life. I stood there, watching the water flow, and I thought, do they think I'm a nuisance? Could it be that everything I've done turned into nothing? No, there is a kind of silence that hurts more than screaming. It's the silence when you realize that you're no longer a priority for anyone, who only remember you when they need you, or when it gets in the way. If you've ever felt that. He comments below with a "I've lived it." Sometimes we think we're alone, but there are so many women out there who understand exactly this pain. And when we recognize ourselves, even if in a comment, loneliness weighs less. After that lunch, the visits became even faster. One day, Melissa showed up alone with a folded pamphlet in her purse. I saw at a glance. Sunshine Hills Clinic, comfortable living for seniors. I pretended I didn't see it. She said something about long-term planning, laughed forcefully, and walked away. That's when something started to change inside me. It was still small, but it was firm. A desire not to let myself be erased, of not letting myself be carried away by the tide of others, to protect what was left of the woman I had always been. But I still didn't know that danger was so close, nor that, behind those dry visits, there was a plan, which was already in progress. Do you believe that a son would be able to cheat on his own mother for money? So wait to see what I found out at my next doctor's appointment, because it was there, in that office, that the truth began to come out of hiding. That day, now, I woke up earlier than usual. I woke up with a heavy heart, but without knowing the reason. It was just a routine appointment with Dr. Adam Whitmore. I said about them. And so was my doctor for over 20 years. He followed when I lost my husband, when I had knee surgery, when Ellie was born, Mr. Car. He always treated me with respect, with that direct way of an old doctor. I prepared a light coffee, put on my blue wool coat, and walked to the bus stop. Spring left Charleston filled with the sweet smell of magnolia. Everything seemed calm on the outside. My sob, but inside me, something told me that this day would be different. When I entered the clinic, I immediately noticed that Adam was strange. He did not greet me with the customary, "How is my favorite patient?" or offer me tea as he did on cold days. He seemed in a hurry, restless, asking things as if he were following a protocol and wants to get rid of it soon. "Have you been sleeping well, Susan? Have you forgotten anything?" I thought it was strange. He was never one to ask like that. Then he measured my blood pressure twice in a row, saying that the device seemed to be defective. Oh, it wasn't. He was the one who was. The tension in the office was like an invisible wall between us. When the appointment was over, I bent down to pick up my bag and he bent over too, pretending to look for something on the floor. It was at that moment that he discreetly tucked a folded paper between the handle of my bag. I saw it on Monday until Crandon. I pretended I didn't see it. He pretended that nothing happened. "What do you miss?" He looked me in the eye for a second and said, "Wow," quietly. "Wow. Take care, Susan Helen." I thanked him, got up slowly, and left. My first impulse was to call Ryan and ask for a ride. As usual, I soon, but my fingers hesitated on the phone. Something in me said, "No, meow." I left the clinic and, without thinking twice, called a taxi. I went in, closed the door and asked, "Take me downtown. Any place with movement?" In the back seat, and as well, calm, with my hands still shaking. I took the ticket out of my bag. It was a simple paper, I found. With his handwriting, I would recognize that trait anywhere. I read the first sentence and my breath froze. "Don't go home. How? Run." My heart raced. My body froze. I continued reading. "Your family is trying to declare you incapacitated. They were here yesterday." They were stopped. "They said you're confused, leaving the oven on, talking to yourself. Don't sign anything. I can help, but you need to get out of the house now." I stood there, with the ticket in my hands, looking out the taxi window as if watching the world change. I had never felt that. It was not fear. It was disappointment. It was as if someone had pulled the ground where I had walked for 70 years. I thought of Ryan, Melissa, Ellie, wow, Kadersi. I thought about all the Sundays, the lunches, now, the birthdays that I prepared with care, and now they were trying to get me out of my house, declare myself incapable. I knew down, as if I were an old piece of furniture that disturbs the room. I leaned my head against the cold window of the car and closed my eyes. And there, in the middle of the city's movement, I understood that consultation had not been about my health. It had been a warning, one chance, and I couldn't ignore it. But I still didn't know everything. I didn't know how deep that plan went, nor what they had already done behind my back. And when I found out, then, yes, I knew there was no turning back. Do you dare to know what I found when I got home that night? I returned home with my heart pounding. The taxi dropped me off at the corner of the street, and I walked the last few meters with slow steps, as if stepping on suspicious ground. No, Bogonate. At every step, I wondered if I was exaggerating, if I had misunderstood. But Dr. Whitmore's note still burned inside my bag as if it had fire. When I opened the door, I knew it. The room was dark, with only the lamp light on. Silence. Oh, when luxury. Too much silence. I snuck into the hallway and heard whispers coming from the office. It was Ryan's voice. I recognized it from afar. Leanne. He and Melissa whispered. Oh. Hurriedly. Well, my only hand. Lindsay went. I went out just to get it. Nervously, Ellie was lying on the couch, with headphones on. As always, as soon as they saw me standing in the doorway, the silence fell like a brick. Melissa pushed something into the drawer. Ryan jumped up, and smiled without showing his teeth, and said, "Wow, Mom, are you back? How was it at the doctor?" I replied with a gentle smile. "What is Jacko?" "No, and a gentle smile. "It was all great, and you were. The son, heart of iron." The doctor even joked that I am going to bury everyone. Melissa forced a chuckle, but it was clear that my return bothered them. Their presence there, at that time of day, without warning, said a lot. Loud. No, commisted he, and I, pretended, I pretended I didn't notice the paper Melissa was hiding. I pretended I didn't notice the look exchanged between the two. I passed through the room as if I were oblivious. But inside, the alert sounded loud. At dinner, the silence was stifling. I made roast beef, rice with almonds, cucumber salad, everything as they liked it, but no one commented on anything. Ellie didn't even take off the headphones. Ryan just pushed the food on the plate, and Melissa stared at my kitchen cabinet as if she planned to renovate it without consulting me. When they finished eating, they went upstairs with the excuse that they needed to sort out some things at the bank. I was alone with the dishes and the sound of the doors closing upstairs. The creaking of the old wood echoed more than ever. It was as if the house was trying to warn me too. I washed everything in silence, each plate as if it were part of an ancient ritual, no, of a life that was slipping through my fingers. But I didn't go to sleep. I waited for the house to fall asleep, and when midnight came, I walked over to the office slowly. I turned on the light carefully and started rummaging. I knew there was something there. Inside the dumpster, almost crumpled and torn into several pieces, I found what I feared. I put the pieces together as if putting together pieces of truth. Voluntary psychological evaluation form. Signature of the responsible family member. My name was written at the top. Now, the rest was torn, but a part froze me whole. Report from the family member. Oh, mental confusion. Difficulty with simple tasks. Episodes of disorientation. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. The doctor's note. It was true. Everything. They were preparing my interdiction. Cold plain. Dirty. Inside my own house. And the question that hammered away was, how far would they be willing to go? To erase me completely? I woke up in the middle of the night to a faint noise, like a chair being dragged in the kitchen. The house was dark, with only the oven light flashing in the corner. It was not common. In fact, in that house, after 10, everything used to be silence. I stood up slowly, still, silently, now, wearing my flowered robe and the slippers Ellie gave me years ago, when she still called me Grandma. I climbed down the steps of the stairs carefully, holding on to the wooden railing that my husband had installed with his bare hands. In the hallway, I hid behind the hallway door and stood there, hearing. And it was there that my soul collapsed. Ryan's voice was low, but firm. She's not going to last another 5 years. We need to act first. My body froze. The world stopped for a second. Melissa replied, "No, in the same cold tone as always. If we can get her to sign anything, we have already got the interdiction. As soon as she leaves the house, no one will question it." Ellie was there too. My granddaughter. Wow. The girl who grew up in my lap. The one I packed on feverish nights. I heard her voice, muffled. Why? Ask. What if she resists? Melissa's response was like a knife in the back. We make it difficult. Hide the medicines. It changes the position of things. In a month, shall look confused herself. No. I felt my legs weaken. I leaned against the wall and put my hand in the pocket of my bathrobe. The doctor's note was still there, folded, sweaty from holding it so much. I wanted to go into that kitchen and scream. I wanted to ask out loud where I went wrong. But I restrained myself more. I returned to the room as if I were stepping on shards of glass. I closed the door carefully. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at nothing. The clock was 3:27 in the morning. It was the same clock that marked Ryan's birth, my husband's funeral, Ellie's first day of school, and now, marked the exact time of my betrayal. I stayed there, quiet, feeling the whole body throb. The heart felt like a drum inside the chest. The mind, a jumble of memories and questions. They were at my house, my enemies, planning to erase me, take away my lucidity, keep me alive inside a place where no one would hear me. My dear Mr. called the cow. And why? By inheritance. Around the house. For the money you think I saved? Is that what I'm worth to them? A bank account and a subscription? Forgive me if I'm being very open here, but it's hard to keep all this in my chest. I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story, putting the wound out. So if you're listening there, if it's touching you in any way, leave a like on that video and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes a small gesture like this is like a hand holding ours in the dark. And look, I still have a lot of things in store to tell you. Much, because that morning I made the hardest decision of my life. I was going to leave that house without them noticing. And when I came back, she would no longer be like the frail mother they thought they had. Want to know how I managed to escape without a trace? So go with me, because it was the longest night of my life. At 4 a.m, without waiting another second, I got up with a certainty I had never felt before. I needed to get out of there. It's not an escape. It was survival. I entered the closet slowly, without turning on the light, and opened the brown leather suitcase that my husband wore on short trips. Inside, I put only the essentials: 2 changes of clothes, my documents, my uniform, some old jewelry that I inherited from my mother, and most important of all, my blue notebook. No, it had been stored for years inside a shoebox, wrapped in a crochet towel, deep in the linen closet, when, no one knew he existed. Inside were all the notes I made throughout my life, passwords, account numbers, the records of the applications that my husband left abroad when he was still alive. I didn't understand much about the financial market, but he did, and he would always say, "Susan, how? Keep everything in your name. One day, you'll understand why. How?" That dawn was the day I took my old cell phone, which almost no one knows I use, and recorded a voice message. I spoke softly but clearly, recording every word I heard in the kitchen that night. I knew I needed proof. Then I sat down at the desk in my room, pulled out a notepad, and wrote calmly, in large letters, I went out to sort out some things. Don't wait for me. Susan, I folded the note, left it on the table in the living room, and took a deep breath. Before leaving, I went to the kitchen and left the empty teapot on the sink. A small detail? No, I'm not concerned, but one that they would notice. I wanted them to know that I passed through there, that I was lucid, strong, and decisive. I walked out the front door with firm steps, my heart beating to the rhythm of courage. I called a taxi on the neighbor's landline, Mrs. Elma, who sleeps with the device in the hallway. I apologized for the time, said it was an emergency. At 5:10 in the morning, would you car station cut, and you saw. I was already sitting in the back seat, watching the city wake up slowly. The sky was beginning to clear behind the old trees of Charleston, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Adrenaline. Can't talk all night here. I asked the driver to take me to the Charleston Place Hotel. It was the same one where my husband took me on our last birthday celebration. Before he got sick, I used the card that was still in his name. An old account. Little used, but which I kept as a precaution. I identified myself as S. Caldwell, and C. Without further details, I asked for a discreet room, paid in cash for the first few days, and went upstairs. When I entered the room, I looked in the mirror and saw myself in a different way. The woman of the reflection was no longer just a grandmother, a widow, a forgotten housewife. He was someone who was about to take the reins of his own life. I took off my coat, sat on the bed for the first time in years. She smiles to herself. Not that smile of someone who is happy, but the smile of someone who finally understood what it is made of. I stood there, in silence, watching the curtain sway with the wind of the air conditioning, feeling something awaken inside me, a kind of power that we forget we have. And it was then that I took the blue notebook, opened it to the last page, and wrote, Day 1. They thought I was weak. They hardly know who they are dealing with. But I didn't know that. In the next 24 hours, someone would find out my whereabouts. And what came next? It almost made me lose everything again. Want to know who was the first to meet me? You won't believe it. That morning, after a night with barely shutting my eyes, I got up early in a hotel room. The sun filtered through the heavy curtains and made the carpet look golden. I opened the suitcase slowly, as if touching wounds, and took a photo that I kept by instinct. It was an old image, yellowed in the corners, but full of life. Me and my husband smiling on the pier of Lake Marion, with little Ryan in our arms, still in a diaper and hair raised by the wind. The three of us there, as if the world was just that afternoon. Looking at that photo was like sticking your hand in time. I remembered the orphanage in Columbia, where we met Ryan. I couldn't have children. We spent almost 2 years in a process that seemed to never end. We made a fundraiser. We sold my grandfather's ring. We lied saying that we had conditions that we never had. But we did it, and that boy turned my heart out of my chest. I remembered the sleepless nights while he cried from fever, from the first day of school, when I cried hidden behind the gate. The times I stopped going to the doctor because his uniform needed to be bought. Once, the doctor found a lump in my breast. I had to investigate, but Ryan needed a new laptop to finish college, and I chose him. I always chose him. In every decision, once so now, under you on, in every resignation. I thought that being a mother was that if we gave everything, we would get it back. But now, locked in this hotel room, with the doctor's note in one pocket and the photo of our old life in the other, I began to understand something that hurt me more than any betrayal. I haven't lost my son now. I only finally saw who he always was. Every cold gesture, every excuse, every distance were already there. I was the one who refused to see it. It's hard to realize that our love was treated as an investment by those we raised with faith. But that's what scares me the most. Well, see, sound that a kai no deal conditionally and arranges. It's not what they're doing to me now. It's just that all my life I've loved alone. As I remembered this, sitting in the beige armchair in the room, so the tears flowed. No, but I didn't cry out loud. Neo, Aguersi, I am not a woman of scandal. I learned early on that pain is lived in silence, that screaming is no use when no one wants to listen. But there is a phrase that did not leave my head at that moment. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what I found out after that is heartbreaking. I cleaned my face, put the photo in the dresser drawer, Mama now, I don't get still here, and took a deep breath. Ooh, I had a lot to think about. He needed to act. It was no longer the time to cry. It was time to remember who I was before I was forgotten. I got up, made a list in the blue notebook, people to trust, accounts to block, documents to review, and at the end of the list, I wrote, Testament, Lord dear, what it cuts to your carpenter, Testament. But I had hardly finished scribbling that name when the phone in the room rang. A voice said, Mrs. Highland, Chakanudam, Caldwell, there is a person here asking for you. He said it's family. Do you want to know who had the courage to look for me first? And what came along with this visit? You can't imagine. When the hotel receptionist said that someone in my family was downstairs, my heart leapt in my chest. My first reaction was fear. Fear of having been discovered. Afraid that they had come to force me to return. But something told me to take a deep breath and ask, who is it? The answer was short. Leoma, a young woman. Ellie, my granddaughter, once young. The last person I expected to see there. I asked them to tell me that I was unwell, that he could not receive it. And I asked for something else, that they not say my room number. When I hung up the phone, wailing, I stood there for a few seconds, staring at nothing. Was it her? Was it really her? Or was it scent? Was there still something good inside that girl I rocked so many nights? I sat down, breathed, and decided that before I opened the door to someone, I needed to protect myself. I took the card I found among my husband's old papers and called the office of a well-known lawyer in the city. Conrad Ellis, heavy name, specialist in fraud and asset protection. I scheduled a time for the same day. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a dark leather room with a cup of coffee in my hands and my blue notebook on my lap. I told him everything. No flourishes. I showed him the doctor's note. I showed the recording on my cell phone, the pieces of the form I found in the trash, the account statements. Conrad listened to me in silence. When I finished, he crossed his arms and said, with a calmness that chilled me, "They are trying to interdict you for financial interest. This is serious, but we can turn the tide." His words were not comforting. They were action. Oh, and that's what I needed. We created a plan. First, blocking any bank transactions without my written authorization. Second, revision of the will. Third, the opening of a silent investigation process, all within the law. And I decided what Tersten. No scandal. No how. And finally, something that took me by surprise. "Have you ever thought about hiring a detective?" he asked. I was surprised, but he explained, "Oh, there's a professional in Charleston. Maxine Holloway. She works with cases like yours. Emotional abuse, manipulation, family fraud. Nay, it goes deep, and he acts with discretion." I wrote down the name. Oh, and I called her that same afternoon. When I heard the steady voice on the other end of the line, I felt like I was facing a woman who knew exactly where she was stepping. We scheduled to meet the next day. For the first time in weeks, I slept with the door locked and my soul lighter. And you know what? As I lay in that hotel bed, I thought about how many women have been through this. How many mothers, grandmothers, aunts, who gave everything and ended up discarded like old junk. Sometimes what hurts the most is not betrayal. It is silence. They erase us slowly until we ourselves begin to doubt who we are. If you've felt this too, comment below with a I know how it is, because there is nothing stronger than knowing that we are not alone. But let me tell you something. That was just the beginning, because the next day, when Maxine showed up with an envelope full of evidence, the world they had been trying to hide began to crumble. Want to know what she found out about my own home? So get ready, because big things are coming. That night, even surrounded by the understated luxury of Charleston Place, clean sheets, the smell of lavender in the air, a window that overlooked the lights of King Street, I felt the greatest emptiness of my life. It was not fear. It wasn't anger. It was a deep silence that came from within, as if all words had run out. I picked up my phone for the last time before going to bed. The screen lit up with a flurry of missed calls. 23 calls from Ryan and Melissa. 23. There wasn't even one from Ellie. The messages that followed made me face, without further excuses, the truth I had spent years avoiding. The first one said, Mom, where are you? We are worried. Go home. And then, don't do that. You are exposing yourself. That can complicate things. Finally, one that hurt like a dagger. If you don't come back, well, take legal action. They called it Providence, but it was a threat. It was a clear message. Either I would come back to be manipulated with a smile on my lips, or I would be dragged as if I were already incapable. I deleted everything. I turned off the device, and I finally allowed myself to face the hardest grief of all. The grief for the family I thought I had. I didn't cry. He had no more tears. Wow. I was at rock bottom, but not in despair. No calculation. I'll watch it down. It was a firm, now, ancient sadness. Wow. Like a stone buried in the chest. You know when you realize that you've dedicated your whole life to an illusion? I lived for years believing that I was loved, when in fact I was only useful, a financial pillar, noyé, a name to facilitate inheritance, a decorative figure at Christmas, and, little by little, I died trying to please, trying to deserve an affection that, perhaps, was never there. I was putting aside my desires, my pains, my desires. I reduced myself. I silenced myself, all in the name of that family. Oh, fine. But in that hotel bed, with no one looking at me, without having to smile so as not to bother me, I felt something new, or perhaps ancient. Freedom. I took the blue notebook, the same one where I keep passwords, memories and decisions, and wrote in my firm handwriting, "When I saw how Carter did you see had you ought to show." I'm sorry. I was good. I was forgotten. But now I am free. I closed the notebook slowly and lay with my head on the pillow. For the first time in a long time, I slept light-heartedly. It was no longer about saving the relationship, nor about giving it a chance. It was about saving me, protect myself, on me. And it was with this thought that I fell asleep. But fate, fate doesn't give such an easy truce, because the next morning, Maxine came back, and what she brought in her hands was more than proof. It was the beginning of the end of that dirty game. Do you want to know what she showed me? So listen carefully, because after that, even I couldn't pretend to be calm. The morning had barely begun when the phone in the room rang. This time, a zero. It wasn't the reception. It was my own cell phone. As Nuzia, of town, which I had turned back on for a few minutes, just to see if there was a message from Maxine. But the caller was Ryan. His name flashed on the screen as if he carried the entire weight of my life. I took a deep breath, pressed the green button, and put it on speakerphone. At the same time, I turned on recording. "Mom?" he said in that voice too sweet to be honest. Mom, where are you? We're worried. You disappeared, left only one note. This is not a thing for normal people. I kept the tone calm, serene, as if not in a hurry. In taking care of myself, Ryan, alone, as I always did, on the other end of the line. Silence for a few seconds. I could almost hear the calculations running through his head. You can't just disappear like that. People will start talking. They'll think you're in trouble. And then I said, "Ooh," without changing my voice. "You're not worried about what they're going to think, son. You're worried about what they're going to find out. He gasped for a moment. Mount. Voice has lost its sweetness. This is crazy. You're acting like you're a victim, but you're not thinking clearly. Well, when tough, not being unaware. You need to get back before that. Before we need to take legal action. That us. As if it were a company. Like I was a problem customer. I closed my eyes and smiled slightly. Take what you want, Ryan. But know one thing. I've already taken what I needed. Courage. And I hung up. The call lasted just over 2 minutes, but it felt like a reckoning with 47 years of history. I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. For the first time, he was the one who was left without knowing how to react. I sat on the edge of the bed, with my hands in my lap, feeling the blood run through my veins again like I hadn't felt for years. I had broken the silence, not with shouting, not with scandal, no, with dignity. Was, and if there's one thing that no one will ever take away from me, it's this. They respected me little in life. But now they would have to fear me. And, I keep thinking, how many mothers out there seen themselves in the same place, knowing everything, but without having a voice, swallowing hard so as not to be called crazy, forgetful, exaggerated. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes that's all we need, to feel that someone is listening. But if you think the tables have already turned, it's because you haven't seen what I found out when Maxine gave me the first dossier. Do you have any idea what they hid inside my own house for months? I didn't have it either. Until that envelope arrived. Maxine arrived in the late afternoon. In her own way, discreet, without flourishes, and but with a look that already said that something big was ahead. He sat in front of me, opened a black briefcase, and took out a thick envelope with the word urgent written by hand. I didn't say anything. I just took a deep breath. I prepared myself, and even so, what I read there took my breath away. Melissa was using my social security number, the equivalent of our social security number, to open credit cards. 5, not 1, 5, and more than that. She was not only opening the accounts, but she was using them. Shopping in luxury stores in Florida, accommodation in expensive hotels, dinners, car rentals, almost $50,000 of debt. In my name. I could even hear my heart racing. I need so what I know on the here and touches in the case, who have always paid the bills when due, that he cut discount coupons to save money at the grocery store, who had been wearing the same coat for 10 winters. I found myself in debt without knowing it. A slow theft hidden under the skin of trust. Maxine continued, with that dry professionalism that I had already learned to admire. And there's more. There's. He took another, smaller folder and showed me a photo. It was Ellie, my Ellie, sitting on a park bench with a belly that was already beginning to show. She's pregnant. No temo matinian kamste. Adapsten sears vigobel. Susan, Alnair, Nilgagio, Tenadel 3 months. The news caught me off guard. My first instinct was fright. Then fear. No, nozenersity goshiri. And finally, the invisible embrace that only a grandmother feels. The father is a professor at the university, married, animalstemen, Darsham, and Mr. Kar Astkuwa. When she found out about the pregnancy, she broke off contact. I took a deep breath. The image of her as a baby came to me like thunder, her curly hair sticking to her forehead after bathing, the loose laughter when I made a small airplane with the spoon of porridge. Melissa is hiding the pregnancy from everyone, Maxine continued, and is trying to get a supposed exchange for Ellie, an excuse to push her away for a while. She was going to use part of her grandma's money to pay for it. I closed my eyes. For a second, I let the weight of it all rest on my shoulders. It wasn't just betrayal. It was layered abandonment. It was lie upon lie. But there was also another truth there. My granddaughter was a victim, just like me. I wrote in my blue notebook, without taking my eyes off the firm handwriting. Ellie is also a victim of her parents' ambition. And there, wow, more than anger, I felt compassion. Because now I saw clearly they were destroying their own daughter to maintain illusion. With each discovery, my pain turned to clarity, and I was no longer a fragile lady on the verge of interdiction. I was a woman with a good memory, with my eyes open, and with everything recorded, every detail, each name, each date. Are you following me here? So keep this phrase that I'm going to tell you now. Wanda Bigoran actually to tell you now. Sometimes we need to lose everything to find out who was never really ours. But the most surprising thing was yet to come, because the next day, while Maxine was still gathering more evidence, Attorney Conrad called me to an emergency meeting. We need to talk about a bank transaction that just happened. Want to know what they tried to do with the last account that was still in my name? You won't believe what I discovered. I was sitting in that blue armchair at the hotel, the same one I've slept in by accident so many times in the last few weeks. When Conrad called me, his voice came with urgency, but also with that sure tone of someone who knows what he is doing. Susan, how? They've taken the next step. Ryan had filed a request for emergency relief in county court. She claimed that I was confused, paranoid, forgetting names, that I left the house without warning and was vulnerable, and more. There was a new doctor who agreed to sign an informal report attesting to my supposed mental instability. When I heard that, a part of me almost laughed, because at that point in the story, I was no longer the woman I was a few weeks ago. I was already one step ahead. Before they could even try thing. I had seen 3 different psychiatrists. I made a point of going in person, by appointment, accompanied by Maxine. All the reports were clear. Lucid patient, oriented, with preserved discernment and no signs of cognitive impairment. I kept everything. Signed, A. recognized, sealed. I was healed. And that morning, when the hearing was scheduled, I decided not to go. I sent Conrad in my place. The strategy was simple. Warune. Silence would speak for me. From afar, Maxine followed everything. When Conrad presented the legitimate medical reports, the audios of the veiled threats, the statements of the debts opened in my name, and the copy of Dr. Whitmore's note, the judge did not have to think twice. It immediately suspended any movement regarding the conservatorship until a formal investigation was completed. He said that, at first glance, there were serious elements of bad faith, that the court was not the place for an early inheritance dispute. Ryan left the room white as a ghost. Melissa, now, according to Maxine, tried to make an offended face, but no one believed the staging anymore. And me? I was sitting at my bedroom window, with a cup of chamomile tea in my hands, watching the South Carolina sky change color. I didn't dress in revenge. I dressed in dignity. Oh, sometimes all we need to do is shut up and let the truth walk on its own. Because the truth, it may even take time. Oh, but it always arrives with firm steps. And on that day, I understood something I want to share with you. There are memories that are like portraits trapped in the soul. You look and feel the smell, the taste, even the sound of that moment. I'll never forget the taste of that tea. How? The light hitting the glass, and the feeling of having regained something I thought I had lost forever. My own worth. What about you? Do you have any memory that you carry to this day that never left you? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, sharing a memory is like lighting a candle in the dark. But, believe me, if you think the siege was tight for them so far, wait until you find out what Maxine found in Melissa's deleted emails. It was there that I found out who really pulled the strings behind everything. The morning I decided to shoot the video, the sky in Charleston was clear, a blue that seemed new, as if even time had decided to give me a sign of a new beginning. I sat in a simple armchair, with my back straight, my soul at peace, and the blue notebook on my lap. There was no makeup, not Kananai, not so true. Not even a filter, just me, my story, and the naked truth. For the first time spoken aloud, Maxine positioned the camera, adjusted the natural light from the window, and Conrad stood behind, his eyes steady, telling me that I had a right to be heard. I pressed the record button, and I started. Now, I started. My name is Susan Caldwell. I'm 70 years old. I have lived for more than 3 decades in the same house, in the same neighborhood. I helped to build with my own hands the life that they are now trying to take from me. His voice did not tremble, because that was not a request. It was a report, and I wasn't there to move anyone. It was about to register, like someone who writes on stone so that no one else erases it. I talked about Ryan's adoption, of how we found him as a baby in an orphanage in Colombia. Now, how did Sarah step child of how we give up everything. Vacations. Wow. nights of sleep, health, to give him a future. I talked about Melissa, how I tried to win her over with patience, with cakes, with forgiveness. I talked about Ellie, who was the son of my maturity. I told him about the signs I ignored, from the averted looks, of the long silences, from the lunches I served, and they just chewed, without looking at me, until the day came when I received the note from Dr. Whitmore. Now, don't go home. Run. I paused, and I let the phrase hang in the air, because that was the beginning of the end, and also the beginning of my return to myself. I talked about the recordings, the debts in my name, the interdiction plan, the lies hidden behind forced dinners and cold hugs. And then, I looked straight into the lens, and he said, my son called me a burden. My daughter-in-law tried to erase me. And my granddaughter. He almost became an accomplice. But time teaches, and I learned not to accept crumbs from those I fed. I didn't have to accuse. I didn't have to scream. The force of truth has a sound of its own, and those who have suffered recognize it from afar. The video was published on a local elderly advocacy channel, something small, designed just to record what no one ever wanted to hear. But in less than 2 days, he flew. Thousands of views, comments from women from all over the country. This story is the same as mine. You spoke for all of us. I also experienced this. I was also left. It was as if I had lit a fire in the middle of a field of ancient silences. People started to recognize me, to write to me, to support me. And it wasn't about fame. God forbid. It was about belonging, about making other women understand that they were not alone, and that it is never too late to get up. Even with shaky hands, the repercussion was such that the local newspapers began to call. A radio station invited me for an interview. A TV reporter knocked on the door of the hotel with a respectful request. The city wants to hear from you. But I knew not everyone was enjoying what they saw, because while the messages of support grew, something began to change on the other side as well. A silence, a retreat, a fear. And that's when I felt they were cringing. The truth had ceased to be mine. Now it was ours. But let me tell you, it was at that time that something even more unexpected happened. A handwritten letter was left at the hotel reception, and the name in the sender was one I hadn't read in a long time. Can you imagine whose letter it was? Because it took me a while to believe it. The letter was folded carefully, wrapped in a beige envelope with no printed sender. But I recognized the lyrics immediately. It was Ellie's handwriting. She had that little curve in the S and the line crossed in the T that I helped teach. When she did her homework sitting at the kitchen table, my fingers trembled, not from fear, from memory. The letter was short, written in blue pen. He said, Window, now avocado, Grandma, kindly, I'm sorry, I didn't know everything. Mom said it was for our good. But now, everyone knows. Forgive me. I love you. I placed the letter in my lap and closed my eyes. It was little, but it was something. And sometimes the first crack in the ice comes from those we least expect. The video was still reverberating when the first consequences began to appear. Melissa was called by the board of directors of the clinic where she worked as an administrative assistant. She was informed that she would be temporarily removed until the allegations were investigated. 2 days later, he lost his position for good. The accusation of misuse of identity was too serious to be ignored. Ryan, for his part, tried to maintain the pose, but at the bank, rumors began to circulate quickly. The video had already been seen by more than 500,000 people, and even without me mentioning the full name, people connected the dots. His wife, involved in fraud. The request for guardianship against her own mother. He was removed from management without warning. He started to work internally under evaluation. Ellie. My granddaughter. When her college classmates started asking questions, she didn't know how to deal with it. A teacher called her to talk privately. Worried. The next day, she made a public, emotional post apologizing. She said she was young, that she was confused, that she loved her grandmother. But the internet doesn't forgive so easily. The comments were divided. Some welcomed. Others pointed out. What was clear is that nothing would be the same as before. Meanwhile, in my little refuge at Charleston Place, I began to receive things I no longer expected. Letters, now, flowers, class. A lady from Beaufort wrote to me saying, "You reminded me that I still have a voice." One teenager sent a typed letter saying he was moved because he saw his own grandmother in me. And one Sunday morning, Pastor Elroy from the church where I attended for 30 years called. Susan, we're going to have a special service next Sunday in honor of his strength. The community wants to see you. I cried in silence for the first time, not out of pain, but out of belonging, knowing that even when blood betrays, there are ties that the heart chooses. I wrote in the blue notebook, "Now, the truth, when it comes calmly, destroys more than a scream." And that was what was happening. A ruin without noise. The fall of the mask. One crack a day. Melissa disappeared from social media. Ryan stopped taking calls. And Ellie. Well, Ellie sent me another letter. This time, with a request. "Can I see you?" But before answering, Maxine arrived with new documents. "Susan, I think you're going to want to see this. They are emails, and there's a name here that changes everything." When she said the name, my skin froze, because there was a person I never imagined could be involved. But it was, and everything, absolutely everything, began to fall into place. When Maxine handed me those papers, the world took a different turn. They were recovered emails, previously deleted, now between Melissa and the assistant pastor of the church, the same one who, for years, sat in my office after services, eating my corn rolls, saying that he admired me. Montan. There they were, messages exchanged late at night, some with financial terms, others with suggestions for how to convince the community that I was mentally unstable, using my advanced age as an argument. Melissa even wrote, "Wow, if she looks confused at the next service, reinforce the idea. Nah, we need testimonies." That wasn't just greed. It was a conspiracy. Cold, calculated, now, one in a so, and it involved more people than I imagined. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and understood what I needed to do. The next day, oh dear no, I asked for a meeting with Conrad. I bow. He said he wanted to revise my will. I want everything I built. Every penny, every brick, serve to lift up those who really need it, and to prevent this story from happening again. We started with the most symbolic. Man, I excluded Ryan and Melissa from any right to the house. The bills, the investments, I cut firmly, but without anger. Then we created a fund in Ellie's name, but with clear conditions. She would only have access if she completed her studies, started psychological treatment accompanied by professionals, and kept a legal distance from her parents for 2 years. It was not punishment. It was protection. For me, and for her, part of the money was destined to serious institutions, aimed at protecting elderly victims of family abuse. The rest, most of it, was placed under the tutelage of a foundation that Conrad helped set up, and more. I asked to act as a counselor. I wanted to be present, to help other women like me. Here, guide, prevent. I don't want revenge. Conrad, no. Why go to these? I said, looking him in the eye. I want to prevent this history from repeating itself. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. So, if you're listening to me right now, like this video and subscribe. Let's make this story reach those who need it. Because if a 70-year-old lady can make noise with dignity, anyone can. And you know what? As I signed that New Testament, with my hands steady, without trembling, I felt no weight. I felt relief. For the first time, everything was in place, but not everything had been said yet, because in the final rolls that Maxine brought, there was a recording made weeks before, an audio where Melissa said something that changed everything, something that still gives me goosebumps today. Do you want to hear what she said? Because I never forgot those words. I never thought I would return to that house with a peaceful heart. But that morning, when I got out of the car next to the bailiff, my steps did not tremble. I was firm, not out of revenge, not out of anger, but for justice. A serene justice, which arrives slowly, without making a fuss, but when it arrives, No one holds back. The house seemed smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the time. Maybe it was the absence of love. The wooden facade, which I painted myself with Henry in the summers, was a little peeling, but the pain, she no longer lived there. The officer rang the bell. Melissa opened the door with an expression that tried to feign surprise, but that only opened up fear. "What's that?" she said, already raising her tone. "What are you doing here with a stranger?" Ryan appeared right behind, tense, trying to keep his voice down. "How? Mom, let's talk." "That's not necessary." I just looked him in the eye. A long look. Dry, wait, precise. And he said, "Why, abacadadid so to redstone," in a low but firm voice. "I was the floor of this house, and you spit on him." Melissa exploded. She started screaming, saying that I was being manipulated, that I had been poisoned by outsiders, that it was madness. The officer remained silent, handing the court order into Ryan's hands, who received it with trembling fingers. His voice almost didn't come out. "Wow, is this really necessary?" I answered with another question. "Was it necessary when you tried to interdict me?" At that moment, I heard a noise at the top of the stairs. It was Ellie, standing still, motionless. His eyes watered. A heavy silence fell over everyone. She didn't say anything, but it stayed there, watching me, as someone who finally sees the other side of the story. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just handed the paperwork to the officer. "You have 48 hours to leave this house. It no longer belongs to you, and it never belonged. This house has a soul, and you tried to stifle hers. Now it's time to go." I climbed the stairs slowly. Each step was a memory. Ryan's first step, the cinnamon-smelling Christmas, the sleepless nights with Ellie's fever. I entered the old room and stopped in front of the dressing table. There, long, among empty perfume bottles and an aged picture frame, was my mother's necklace, a silver reliquary with a picture of her on one side, and a hair of my father's from the other. I grabbed the necklace, closed my eyes for a moment, and whispered softly, "No, what you out? Thank you for teaching me to be firm without losing tenderness." I kept the reliquary in my pocket. I took one last look at that room, the scene of so many tears and also so much hope, and closed the door. No rush, without fuss, like someone who closes a book after the last page. And you know what's curious? It was going down those stairs that I felt for the first time in many years that the house was mine again. Not for the paper, but for peace, the peace that dwells where love was true. And when I crossed the room to the exit, Ellie was still there, more Cabadon, standing, one days, quiet. But before leaving, Windas, she took a step. "Now, Abornam, only one." And he said, "One? Grandma, one is so tired. Can I go with you? Now, tell me, do you think I said yes?" or that, no, out of love. I had to say no. When Ellie asked me if she could go with me, my heart jumped. One of those that we feel more in our chest than in our body. I looked her in the eyes and saw the girl who one day drew with chalk in my backyard, who hid behind the curtains playing magic, who asked for one more piece of cake. Grandma, just one more. I also saw the frightened girl, involved in mistakes that were not only hers. I put my hand on her face with affection and said, "Why still talk on her so? Not now. My daughter. First, you need to find yourself alone. Then, we'll meet again." Well, she just nodded, tears flowing, nod, went sound, and I left. But I took that look with me in the days that followed. Now, one of days, justice did what needed to be done. The federal police concluded the investigation and confirmed the misuse of my social security number. Melissa was formally indicted, and in a matter of days, the news spread like fire in dry straw. Her name printed in local newspapers, on news sites, and in videos on YouTube, along with excerpts from my story. No, Ryan didn't escape either. He was called to testify in a separate process, this time for attempted intentional interdiction and asset fraud. And even though he tried to protect himself, the bond between him and Melissa was too clear. There was no way to escape. The Caldwell family's reputation once meant respect in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood has become synonymous with shame. It wasn't a noisy revenge. It was slow, public, irreversible. The videos of my speech, the support services, the short interviews I gave to groups for the protection of the elderly. All of this took on a proportion that I never imagined. And among so many comments and messages, a letter came to me. And wondered is out of such segwaro calm, whispers how, handwritten, habitten, in black ink on plain paper, nisobonao. It was Ellie's. Grandma, I don't expect you to forgive me now, but I want you to know that I am seeking help. I cut off contact with them. Am living with a colleague. I've gone back to classes, and I've made my first appointment at the college's psychological support center. My son, yes, it's a boy, is going to be named Henry in honor of her husband, and I hope that one day he can hear from his mouth who his grandfather was. When I finished reading, when the letter was already wet with my tears, but not sadness, of relief, of a pain that, after a long time, finally turned into peace. The justice I wanted was never a cell, although some deserved it. The justice I was seeking was another. It was their conscience being exposed. It was seeing the masks falling without me having to scream. It was walking the streets with my head held high, without carrying guilt that was not mine. And it was, above all, knowing that my story was not in vain. Because today, no. If you type my name on the internet, you don't find scandal. Find courage. And when an elderly woman has courage, the world listens. But he still had one last thing to do, one thing my heart kept until the end. Do you know what it is? Because sometimes the last step is the hardest of all. My new house is small, white, lineal, with blue windows, on top of a modest hill on the outskirts of Asheville. When I open the kitchen window in the morning, I smell lavender coming from the bed I planted with my own hands. Right next to it, the hydrangeas grow soft, full, almost proud, as if they knew that a free woman now lives there. Not a heroine, nor a martyr, just a lady tired of living for others and determined to finally live for herself. My days are simple. I wake up early, drink my coffee in silence, walk to the apple orchard that the neighbor lets me visit. Sometimes I write letters to myself. Sometimes I only look at the sky. I went back to painting. You know, it had been more than 40 years since I touched a brush. I stopped when Ryan was born. Life called me to other urgencies. But now, with no one to please, I can mix the colors the way I want. A blue with pink, an orange that bleeds into lilac, and no one to say, this is wrong. I also started to learn how to use the computer. I have weekly classes with a patient teacher named Missy, who smiles whenever I hit the button. You learn fast, Susan, and I think, isn't it that I learn? When we allow ourselves, the world becomes school again. Ellie writes to me. Sometimes he sends audio. We talk little, carefully. She still has the tone of the girl who trusts me. But now, with the shadow of the woman who made a mistake, I hear her. I do all unnecessary, wasted one. And I answer sincerely. I don't affect it. Time, another so the confidence. My granddaughter, I said in one of the letters, does not erase everything, but it reveals what deserves to stay. She still needs to show me who she chooses to be, and I need to allow myself to see. But now, no rush. I receive many letters from other women, from other states, neighbors, strangers, ladies who have never seen me, but recognize me. I lived just like that. Susan, you told what I could never say. My son treats me like a burden, too. Sometimes I sit on the porch, reread these letters, and pray, not angry, not even with supplication. Well, I only speak to God in a low voice, as if telling old secrets, as if thanking for the courage to continue. And if there's one thing I've learned in all this, it's that being too good can look beautiful, but it is not a virtue if it is at the expense of itself. Why? How many times have I kept quiet to keep the peace? How many times have I given myself, hoping that someone would see me? Today, I see myself. And that's enough, because when we choose ourselves, loneliness stops hurting and becomes freedom. But there's still one last thing I didn't tell you. A letter that arrived a few days ago, with a name I hadn't read in over 30 years. And when I opened it, The world has turned again. Want to know who sent it? Because even I had to sit down when I saw it. The letter arrived on a cold morning, with the stamp of another state and the name I had buried in the folds of memory decades ago. Ryan's biological mother. Wow. Inside, lo, there were only 3 things: a request for forgiveness, an old photograph of him as a baby in her arms, and a note. Whoa, thank you for loving what I couldn't. I closed my eyes and let the tears flow, not of pain, but of understanding. Life, in the end, is made up of plots that we don't always choose, but that we can rewrite. Today, I'm here, now, more serene than I ever imagined it would be. Melissa was convicted. He is serving his sentence in a closed regime. Ryan, with his reputation tarnished, moved to another city. He never tried to contact him again. Ellie continues her studies, goes to therapy, and, little by little, rebuilds her own path without shortcuts. And me? I grow hydrangeas, write letters that perhaps no one will read, and every afternoon I sit on the same bench in the garden, with my cup of tea and a piece that I would not trade for anything in the world. No, I thought I needed to be loved, to be happy, but I understood that true love is the one we learn to have for ourselves. The big lesson from all this is simple. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, nor justify their pain, nor explain his absence, nor beg for presents. Not for presents. The love that counts is what stays when the rest falls. And time. Time is a silent sculptor. He takes away excesses, sculpts the soul, and reveals what has real value. And if you stayed with me so far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Leah, while sitting much to Calder than stainless and calm, his presence accompanied me on this crossing. Having someone to listen, even in silence, changes everything. Enjoy this video as if offering a tight hug. It warms up more than you think. And subscribe here to the channel. It's like inviting me to come back the next coffee afternoon. Tell me which city you are watching from. I want to feel you closer. And it activates the bell. Well, I did say sometime, how boys so stay. See, that way you don't lose when the coffee is brewed again, because I still have a lot of stories to tell you. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, ladies, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.